The AP Top 25 has officially dropped. No more speculation needed. No more way too early rankings. No more predictions anymore. And joining me to break down everything in the AP Top 25, including who got left out for the SEC, who's too high and who's too low, it's On3's national college football analyst, Jesse Simonton. Jesse, what's going on, man?
Appreciate you having me.
So let's go ahead and break down the top 25 as we take a look. Everybody knew Georgia was going to come in as the number one team. Texas and Alabama, both top 5 teams. Ole Miss comes in at 6. You got Missouri coming in at 11 with an elite offense. LSU at 13. Tennessee at 15. Oklahoma comes in at 16. Texas A&M at 20. So in total, 8 or 9 SEC teams in the top 25, rounding it out. Jesse, want to get your initial thoughts to the top 25 and see who did the AP leave out? Who's too high? Who's too low? Just wanted to get your initial reaction to the preseason's top 25.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly very chalky. That jumps out, I think, from the jump. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, in my projections from a week ago, I had these same 25 teams, not obviously in this exact order, but pretty darn close to it. So I'm not surprised at kind of how the field shook out. I do think that there's some teams. I would say Tennessee probably slightly underrated a little bit. You know, I could see them pushing closer or maybe flip flopping with LSU. Um, but it's hard to quibble about a couple spots. But I think they got it right. I think probably in terms of the 25 teams, you can make a case that, you know, a G5 school like Boise State could be in there, an Iowa State, Louisville, Virginia Tech. But I think, you know, you kind of rankings 15 through 35 are pretty much kind of toss them in a hat and pick them out blindly. So I think the AP, you know, all things considered, did fairly well here.
What about Texas A&M? I see them at 20. Do you think that they should be above? To me, they should be above either Kansas State or Oklahoma State, because when I just look at those two, when I look at K-State, they've got a great returning quarterback who's going to be a star in the making, but he's still very young. And when I look at Mike Gundy's squad going into 24, their defense is going to be pretty good, but still, they've still got a lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball. Now, for Mike Elko in his first year, there's obviously going to be questions, having to replace a head coach, having to replace a whole new staff. Just looking at the defensive side of the ball, they look really good. Secondary should be good. The defensive line should be one of the best in the SEC. And when you look at the offensive side of the ball, you got a guy in Connor Weigman who hasn't played a full season of college football just yet as a starter, and he's coming off of an injury last year, and there's still question marks there. But either or, do you think that they should be ranked above those teams, or think they're right where they are at 20?
Yeah, to me, I kind of think a lot of the Big 12 is kind of a grab bag, you know, with those contenders. So like I said, I think it's hard to kind of quibble with some of these spots. I would say that Texas A&M is properly rated, you know, coming into the preseason based on what happened a year ago. You know, this is a team that has clearly not met expectations the last few seasons. Is that going to change with new management in town? The vibes in Station are certainly a lot better. I'm extremely high on their edge rushers, Nick Scorton, you know, Stewart. You know, I think the fact that they get to face a top, you know, 7-10 team in Notre Dame in week 1 at home, basically breaking in, not only, you know, missing their two offensive tackles from a year ago, but then you lose Charles there, you know, their projected starting left tackle just a week ago with a torn labrum. So that certainly is going to be, you know, an advantageous matchup for the Aggies. And so they're going to have a chance to kind of change that ranking almost immediately. So I would say properly ranked right there around 20. We got to see it. I think they deserve to be ranked. Their upside is certainly higher than that. You know, I've written it on 3 previously this offseason that I think they have, you know, sleeper potential. a lot of things have to happen right for those cards to kind of come together. And they've already suffered a significant injury in fall camp, losing their number one tailback, 5-star, Ruben Owens, and so that's a tough pill to swallow. But I think A&M at 20, whether they're right behind or right ahead of some of those Big 12 teams, not too much to parse there.
What you think about West Virginia? I know they kind of have the same mantra as Texas A&M. Great, a lot of starters returning on both sides of the football, but again, hasn't produced a whole lot over the last 5-10 years. Do you think they could have had a right to be ranked, or do you think they're good right now at where they are right now?
Yeah, again, they're going to have a prime opportunity in week 1, against Penn State, which has to go to Morgantown. So I think they're kind of a see it to believe it team. Last year they did win 9 games. Neil Brown was kind of in the Billy Napier position. Florida's coach finds himself in right now, which was he's kind of the hot seat du jour, and he was able to work his way off that. Now having said that, they won a bunch of really close games. I mean, they were incredible in these coin flip games. That luck, that nature tends to kind of meet towards the middle a little bit. So do they recede? Are they able to compete in what I think is going to be a very chaotic and competitive Big 12? TBD. So them being just on the outside looking in, no real qualms there. Could absolutely see them being a top 25 team come midseason, or could see them tumbling and they're way down the Big 12 standings because all those teams just kind of feast on each other.
When you look at the top 25 as a whole, do you think that especially when you look at 10 through 19 to me, do you think that there should be a lot of change to be made? I know Florida State has a lot to say about it. I know that they're a top 10 team, but you look at the talent that they lost from last year. You lose Jordan Travis, you lose your top edge rusher, you lose a guy that was in the middle, but you bring back a guy in Duje Uyunglele. Are they too high?
No, I mean, I'm someone that I'm a believer in Florida State. I think Mike Norvell's hit record in the portal is as good as any. You mentioned the edge rusher. They obviously did lose Jared Verse, but they bring back Peyton, and then they went and grabbed Marvin Jones Jr. From the portal in Georgia. His dad played at Florida State. He was kind of one of their spring stars. I think there's a lot of optimism there that he and Peyton are going to really crush it off the edge, and so. When you have, that, and then you bring in basically Alabama, East, because you brought in a whole bunch of dudes from Tuscaloosa, including tailback Roydell Williams. I think they really like those guys. They like Earl Little. So I think Florida State right around top 10 is totally, satisfactory. Where I would say I think the voters maybe came up a little bit short, which maybe you were kind of leading to with that 10 to 19. I think Miami's a little bit too low. Now, I get the skepticism with Mario Cristobal. I get the, trepidation of backing a guy who has, again, kind of failed to meet expectations at various points in his career. But this is a Hurricanes team that's not all that different, I think, from Ole Miss or Missouri, where they've kind of pushed the chips into this 2024 season. They've invested heavily in NIL to build this roster, to retain parts of the roster, to upgrade other elements of the roster. And so you bring in Cam Ward, Damian Martinez. They're going to have one of the best pass rushers, not only in the ACC, but in the country with Ruben Bain and some of the guys they have there. So I would think they should be just closer to Clemson and Florida State instead of maybe a little bit more separated from the pack. I mean, the odds suggest as much as well, considering all 3 schools are effectively a coin flip to win the ACC this year.
Yeah, and I think it's also Miami's history over the last 10 years. I mean, this has just been a team that at one point was basically the golden standard of what a national championship team should look like. And then all of a sudden you have guys that are just evading them, going to different schools. The state of Florida really picked up on the recruiting trail. The transfer portal, they've had hit or miss prospects here and there. But then it seems like this year, I feel like their offense has an opportunity to really up the tempo this year. because when I got a firsthand look at Cam Ward whenever he was at Incarnate Word, I'm a student at Southeastern, that's why. And when I look at Ward, I look at his intangibles. He's been in offenses that have literally just taken off. He was at Washington State in the Pac-12, and you know they love to throw the football. They've been doing it since the beginning of the 21st century. He was at Incarnate Word and G.J. Kinney and the bright young offensive mind that he is, who's now at Texas State and is doing wonders there. Now, when you pair him with a Miami Hurricanes team that has an opportunity to rise in the coming years with a great coaching staff, that Shannon Dawson believes that the offense can be very explosive, who has a good track record as well, who's going to be even better as an offensive coordinator, who was with Houston for a while, was with Southern Miss, was with Kentucky, was with West Virginia during Geno Smith's final year. And so he's got a good track record to help a guy like Cam Ward really exceed his full potential and really rise his draft stock into the 2025 season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in the potential there. We certainly need to see it because, like you said, Miami is uh, stepped on the rake. I think one too many times over the last decade or so. They haven't had a 3,000-yard passer, I think, since like 2017. And Ward's a guy who has 44 career starts, I think like 135 total touchdowns or something like that in his career. So he's going to put up numbers, and he's kind of a hand glove fit, not only in that offense, but the fact that he excels so dramatically in throwing to the slot. And lo and behold, Miami might have the best slot receiver, in the ACC, and Xavier Restrepo. So I think that's going to be a combination that works wonders. Now the pressure's on the Canes immediately, week one. I mean, again, we're talking about there's not a whole lot of difference, I think, between teams 15 through 30, 35. I mean, you're talking about a Florida team that absolutely could pick off the Canes in week one. So curious to see how that one goes out. Florida obviously was not ranked in the preseason here, but again, you're talking about Vegas power polls and that kind of stuff. Where that roster is, that they absolutely are a threat, and the line suggests as much to upset a team with a little number next to their name in week one.
Jesse Simonton, National College Football Insider over at on3.com. Want to give a good shout out to our good friends over at SeatGeek. Go on over to SeatGeek.com or download the SeatGeek app on your Android or Apple device and use code SECU for $20 off of your first purchase. And I'm looking at SeatGeek right now at some of the ticket prices for these opening games for Texas A&M, for Florida, for Georgia. Georgia's their cheapest price so far for a big game like this, $217. So you'll be saving a good bit of money, especially when you use that code SECU. Pay less than $200 to go to a game like this, especially one that will probably define either both teams' season as the season goes on. That's SeatGeek.com, the SeatGeek app on your Android Apple device. SECU, $20 off of your first purchase. But we're going to go ahead, Jesse, and we're going to look at your initial top 12 for the college football playoff. You've got Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, and Utah each winning their conference and being a player in the college football playoff. That's followed by Texas, Oregon, Alabama, Ole Miss, Michigan, Notre Dame, Missouri, and Boise State, who you think is going to get at that group of five. My question to you whenever I look at this initially, what about Michigan intrigues you other than their defense? I know that they have a fantastic secondary. They've got two of the best defensive players in college football in Will Johnson and Mason Peters coming back for their senior years, I believe. What about Michigan really intrigues you? And there's another team that I want to get to as well, but we'll start with Michigan first.
Yeah, I mean, Mason Graham, the defensive tackle there, is one of the best players in all of college football. Kenneth Grant also back. I mean, they're going to have the best, interior duo, and we just saw what that did a year ago for Texas when they had Sweat and Byron Murphy. And so when you have Will Johnson in the secondary, I think their linebackers, a couple transfers that they got, one from Maryland this past year, and then Ernest from Nebraska 2 years ago. I don't think they're going to miss a beat defensively. They're still going to be favored, I think, in 9 or 10 games this season. Certainly, there are a ton of question marks when you lose 13 guys to the NFL, an all-time coach in Jim Harbaugh. Honestly, I'm just banking on kind of some continuity there. There's a lot of folks, writing today, that Michigan's overrated, in the AP top 25, even though they're, ranked 9th. I think you can make a case they should be ranked ahead of Penn State. So and my poll kind of, shows that thusly, or my preseason predictions, I think, kind of play that out. So is Alex Orji the guy at quarterback? We don't know. Can Donovan Edwards fill the void of Blake Corum? To be determined. But there's enough there that I think just blindly selling the Wolverines short. I think, they're the lowest ranked returning champion since Auburn in 2011. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of bad teams in the Big Ten, and Michigan's going to get to play a lot of those teams. They also, get to play a newcomer in USC that we're not sure about. Where's that defense going to be early in the season? Maybe Danton Lynn figures it out, by mid-October, but Michigan will be in the rearview mirror long by then. They'll play them long by then. So I'm still banking on the fact that this is a team that's kind of self-corrected within the last 3 or 4 years. And even though there's a new head honcho in charge, I don't see a dramatic slippage when you look at their schedule and kind of the rest of the Big Ten.
Another team that I noticed is Missouri at the bottom at 11. They're one of the last teams in the SECs to get in. That totals 5 SEC teams in your initial ranking, in your initial top 12. Other than the duo of, we all know about what Brady Cook and Luther Burden can put up, and they put up gaudy numbers. They have talent all around. The defense still has to replace a first-round talent at an interior. Secondary-wise, you've got to replace some first-team All-SEC talent. Do you think is Missouri's offense going to have to get into a track meet at the initial part of the season before they start getting into a groove on defense?
We'll see. I mean, I think what probably their biggest loss defensively was their coordinator. The fact that, Blake Baker and then the line coach, Kevin Peoples, ended up going to LSU. I think they did a really good job in the portal, kind of filling a bunch of holes, whether it was a Zion Young from Michigan State. They're really high on the kid they got from Georgia, edge rusher Darius Smith. They bring in McClellan from Florida. So I think that defensively there's probably going to be some growing pains there. The good thing for Eli Drinkowitz and the Tigers is that, again, they're kind of in this all-in season like Ole Miss, because by SEC standards, their schedule is extremely favorable. You don't have to play Georgia. You miss a lot of the better. I think their hardest game is at Alabama, and they miss a lot of the other top 10, top 5, top 10 teams, and so. The Tigers absolutely could go 10-2. They really like what they've done at tailback, replacing Cody Schrader with kind of a 1-2 punch with the App State kid and then Marcus Carroll from Georgia State. These are 2 guys that have rushed for 1,000 yards in previous seasons. So could Tennessee take that spot? Absolutely. Could Penn State find its way into the rankings and pluck one of the, SEC spots, and grab it for the Big Ten? Certainly so. I think what was most interesting about this exercise, to just kind of remind people, I actually had Tennessee and Penn State in my top 12. But it's not the 12 best teams or the 12 highest ranked teams, even though that's what, the likes of Nick Saban and others, have kind of pined for. It's the highest ranked 4 conference champions. The next highest ranked conference champion is then likely going to be the group of 5, unless it's a completely outlier season. So Boise State, in my rankings, grabbed a spot. And then it's the remaining at-large spots. So even though Penn State and Tennessee technically were in my top 12, in my top 25, they didn't make the cut.
When you look at Florida this year, And you posted about this, I believe, earlier today. Now that we get a look at the top 25, they play 6 AP top 25 teams, and I believe 3 or 4 of them are top 10. Now you got to play 2 on the road. When you look at the month of September for the Florida Gators, you're playing Miami at a neutral site. You play Samford, Texas A&M, and at Mississippi State. Is there a scenario to where Florida has the opportunity to go 4-0?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly plausible. I wouldn't say it's likely, and I would be skeptical that that's how it plays out, but absolutely. I mean, again, this is and as someone that I mean, this is I've been around Billy a lot this off season, and he is not. I've said this before, and I think it bears repeating. He has not carried himself like a coach that believes he's about to get fired. Now we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. We'll see if that optimism is merited or not. But he certainly likes what he has. I think there's some offensive line concerns early in fall camp if they can get that sorted out. Defensively, they believe they're going to be much improved, not only with the personnel that they have when you bring in a Pop Howard and some other guys from the portal, but I think they feel like Austin Armstrong in year 2 as a coordinator is going to not only be better but be behooved by the fact they brought in Ron Roberts from Auburn to kind of be kind of his right hand man. Armstrong's still calling the defense, but Roberts has been around, been a DC at a bunch of different places. So again, the week 1 game against Miami is the anxiety bowl. There's a lot of pressure on both those coaches. It's not exactly a loser leaves town match because Mario has a 10-year contract, but whoever loses that game is going to kind of go home with their tail tucked between their legs and saying, man, it could be a wild season, a long season, because you consider some of the other games on the Florida schedule, especially. I mean, you talk about September, could go 4-0. They absolutely could. Then you look at that back slate when you go Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU, Florida State. I mean, there's not a 5-game gauntlet than any other team in the country that's playing worse than that.
Yeah, here's why I say that they can start 4-0. Because, like we mentioned already, Miami could be a toss-up game. Either or could win. Florida right now, according to ESPN, is the favorite in that game. They should get an easy one against Samford, no doubt about that. Texas A&M, that's also a 50-50 game. They could pull out a win there. Again, going to Mississippi State, a 50-50 game. They're the favorites in their first 4 games going into this one. And I do think Florida is a very talented team. I think last year, the locker room just got lost. It was just a very toxic environment to be around. And I looked at how the coaches reacted to players, and it was just not a good sight. And it showed during the Florida State game. I don't know who it was that slapped I think it was either a GA or another assistant's coach's hand off to get back into the ball game. But you could tell the locker room was kind of lost last year. And I think this is Billy Napier's chance to really regain the trust of these guys and really regain the locker room in this year. So that's why I think that if you start 4-0, this is a chance for Florida to really save their job, save Billy Napier's job, get a chance to a bowl game, because after UCF on October 5th, it's a brutal stretch down the road. But if you can pull off an upset here or there, I mean, you got to start off hot in order to even get close to a bowl game. That's why I say that they have an opportunity to start 4-0, and I think they will start 4-0 on the season. So going forward, yes, we will see. So going forward, final thoughts as we close out another great show with our good friend Jesse Simonton over at on3.com. Final thoughts for you, Jesse, as we are closer and closer to week 1. What is the most notable game in the SEC other than when you look at Miami and Florida and Texas A&M and Notre Dame that could define week 1 of the 2024 season?
I mean, I think it has to be in terms of week one SEC. I mean, it's got to be Texas A&M, Notre Dame, just because of the potential. I mean, that's why game day is going there. Certainly, Clemson, Georgia is gonna carry a lot of weight. I think most expect the Bulldogs to kind of beat up on the Tigers a little bit. Elsewhere, I'm kind of curious obviously about LSU, USC. I mean, that's going to be a huge one. Both coaches entering kind of, critical year threes for different reasons, but not all that dissimilar from the Florida Miami game. Whoever loses that game is going to be facing a kind of a tall task, uphill battle, and a lot of noise around their program, even after just a single week.
Jesse Simonton over at on3.com, national college football analyst, joining us on SEC Unfiltered. Jesse, we appreciate your time. Let us know where we can find you, whether it be on social media or more about On3, man.
Yeah, you can catch me on the front page at On3 just about every day with a column there, and you can catch me on Twitter or X or whatever we want to call it these days at Jesse R.E. Simonton. So yeah, hit me up and don't be afraid to interact with. We got the weekly mailbag coming back on Wednesdays. Lots of predictions, columns. Season's right around the corner, so ready to go.
Jesse, we appreciate your time, man. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and can't wait for college football season to start back up.
Thanks for having me.